and welcome to Leadership in Real Life, Raw Stories of Leading and Learning. I am your host, Erica Taylor Beck, the founder of Authentic Foundations. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Leadership in Real Life, where I will be talking about mastering emotional intelligence for entrepreneurial success. And this is also for leadership. This was a presentation that I did recently for the SCORE Orlando's Coffee with a Leader session, but it is also relevant for leaders and managers. So go ahead and get started. If you're not familiar with emotional intelligence, it is essentially the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions in a way that helps you relate to others and to communicate effectively. So this is a good way for you to understand your emotions, what causes them, how to manage them and to regulate them so that they don't get the best of you, as well as how to understand and recognize body language and other people so that you can use your emotional intelligence to better navigate conversations and communication in a way that works out really well for both sides. So, one thing I love about emotional intelligence is that, well, one thing is we call it EI or EQ, so your emotional quotient, which is the similar idea of the intelligence quotient or your IQ. But unlike IQ, which is pretty set throughout your life, EQ or EI can be measured and improved with practice. So you can measure both, but you can actually practice and put some techniques in play to be able to increase and improve your emotional intelligence so that if you're listening to this now and thinking, look, I've never been good at emotional intelligence. I don't really know why I should start now. I'm already X years old. There's no point in starting. That's not true. What I love about it is that you can actually get better. The only thing limiting you from improving your emotional intelligence, quite frankly, is you. So I'd love to walk through some of these things with you to help you understand. And again, this was for a presentation for entrepreneurs, but it does apply to leaders and managers and people who are working in corporate. But you might be thinking, does this really matter? And if I said no, this would be a really short presentation and podcast. But the answer is yes, it does matter. And the reason that this matters is because energy is everything. If you are going into a meeting, if you are talking to an employee, if you're doing a sales pitch and you don't really feel confident in what you're doing, or you don't really know what to do or how to handle the situation, that insecurity and that self doubt is going to bleed through the interaction. And people will feel it and know, like, ooh, they're not really feeling confident about what they're saying and doing. So, should I feel confident in what they're saying and doing? It impacts how you hold yourself. So, if you are feeling confident, you're going to speak a little more slowly, more clearly. You might hold yourself a little bit more proudly and sit up. Whereas if you feel nervous and uncomfortable, you might hunch forward, you might have your arms crossed, you might not make eye contact, and you're going to come across as somebody who seems a little bit unsure of themselves. And so emotional intelligence is going to help you portray yourself more confidently, but it's also going to help you handle those emotions so that when things happen that are out of your control, and let's be real, as an entrepreneur and a leader, you're sometimes putting out fires off and on throughout the day. So, how do you handle those? And how do you tackle things that pop up that are unexpected in a way that doesn't throw off your entire flow? As you learn how to handle those emotions and how to handle interactions more calmly and more rationally, you're going to have a better chance of building relationships, trust, communication, and ultimately, in most situations, as an entrepreneur, you're not selling just a service or a product, you're selling yourself. And as a leader, there are multiple managers and directors and vice presidents out there. And when you think about them, they're not all the same. What really makes them stand out in your mind isn't their technical knowledge was fantastic and therefore they're a really great leader. It has nothing to do with their years of experience, with their functional skills. What you really remember about a leader is how they made you feel, how they led the team and made the team come together to share a goal and achieve it. It's that part about selling yourself. You are bringing your unique viewpoints and personality to a situation. And so it really does matter how people perceive you and how they relate to you. Because if they like you, if they trust you, if they feel like you are a genuine person who has their best interest in mind in these decisions, they are more likely to want to buy from you. They're more likely to want to work for you, to go the extra mile for you. Whereas if they think you're a jackass and that you're just some kind of smarmy salesperson or you're just in it for whatever is best for you, they're going to do the absolute bare minimum to make a paycheck. They're not going to want to sign a contract with you. It's really important for you to build relationships because relationships are ultimately at the core of being an entrepreneur and really at the core of being a leader. So yes, short answer is it does matter. And I'm going to share the 5 factors of emotional intelligence with you. They are self-awareness, which is recognizing and being aware of the emotions that you have and the triggers that cause them. Self-regulation, which is how you can control those emotions so that they don't get out of hand where you lose control of a situation. Motivation, which is going to help you to just get up and keep trying each day, and also to put yourself into new situations that will give you opportunities to try new things and expand your skill set. Social skills, which are how you interact with other people, and your empathy, which is how you relate to folks and really see them and recognize what they're going through. And so there's no special order for these, but these are just the 5 factors. You must be able to manage yourself before you can effectively manage a team, a business, other relationships. At the core of all of that is how you manage you. And so that's why this stuff is really important. I know it seems soft to talk about soft skills, and I feel like that really diminishes the importance of them. Soft skills are not a nice to have. They are actually a must have. And most people would tell you that they're more important to have than the technical skills. You can learn technical skills, people can teach you process. It takes a lot more development to really learn how to care about people. And that's why you have to practice it. Because if it's not something that you're born with, you do have to develop it. And it's going to take you farther in your career than you would just by being somebody who's really technical but can't work with other people. And now I'm going to break into each of those 5 factors and explain them a little bit more. Self-awareness, as I mentioned, is the ability to recognize your own thoughts and your own emotions and feelings. But also, if you're not necessarily good at that and saying, oh, I'm feeling really anxious today, maybe I'm noticing that my heart rate is skyrocketing. My heart is pounding. I'm noticing that my hands feel really clammy and they're cold. I'm noticing that my shoulders are up to my ears and I'm clenching my jaw and my tongue is pressed really tight to the roof of my mouth. Maybe you're not good at recognizing the emotion, but if you start to recognize the physiological changes that are happening, you might recognize that your body is trying to tell you something. And if you take a moment with me to feel your body and do a scan from your head down to your toes and just feel where you're holding any tension. Again, maybe your shoulders, neck, your top of your shoulders, your lower back, and you're bouncing your leg, but just feel where you might be having some tension. And that might be a sign of something that you're carrying. And if you can first identify it, that's one big part of self-awareness. But then the second part is to think about what's causing that. And maybe it's I'm really nervous that I have a big sales meeting this afternoon and I really want to make a sale. And if this pitch doesn't go well, I'm going to be really disappointed. Maybe it's I have to have a conversation with my employee today because I need to give them feedback that they're not meeting expectations. And I know they're not going to take it well. And there's a chance that they're going to cry. And I really don't want to do it. So I've been putting it off, but I know I need to get it done. And that might be what's causing it. And so once you can understand what those triggers are, how do you better prepare yourself so that they don't cause those reactions? How can I be better prepared to give feedback to my employee? And maybe it's giving more feedback more frequently throughout the week in one-on-one so that we don't get to a point where I have to say, oh, you've been really missing the mark for a while now. We should have been talking about this all along. Maybe it's having a framework in place where you can give feedback more comfortably. And there are a lot of those. I talk about those in a lot of my courses. There's different frameworks for giving feedback in a way that helps you to hit all of the key things that you want to say so that you say them effectively. Maybe if it's a sales pitch, how can I be best prepared to go into the sales meeting and have all of my ducks in a row so that I feel like I can give all the details that they might need, be able to share my pricing, and feel confident about asking them if they are interested in working together. Once you know what your triggers are, you can start to think how you can better prepare yourself to not respond to them as triggers anymore. Maybe you say, oh, yeah, I'm a little bit anxious about it, but I'm going to be okay because I feel really good about how I've prepared. Once you know that, it gives you more power over yourself and situations so that they don't necessarily have more power over you. Now, self-awareness was the first one, and then we're going to move into self-regulation, which is really the ability to control your emotions and not let them get the best of you when they arise. Now, typically, this is very natural and normal. Your physiological response when you feel triggered, when you feel threatened, when you feel frightened is flight or fight. And we've all heard about that where it's you got to run from the bear, or you got to be ready to fight that bear. That's wonderful in life and death situations where you really do need to fight or flight. However, most of these interactions are just interactions. It's a conversation, it's a sales pitch, it's giving feedback, it's having a tough conversation. This is not a need for fight or flight, but your body's response is very prehistoric in a sense where it says, oops, flood it with adrenaline. We need to make a decision. So if you take a second to calm down, you don't have that emotional hijacking, which is where your emotions come in and they flood your logic. And now you're running or you're fighting and you're swinging wildly and you don't really know what you're doing or why. So you want to take a second to go from a 10, maybe down to a 6, down to a 5, just enough where you can at least be, okay, I don't need to respond immediately. I can get myself together. Now, rationally, logically, how do I need to respond to this situation? And then you can go forward with a little bit more clarity. So the goal here is to not go into that fight or flight and immediately respond and lash out. So if somebody, an employee, drops the ball on something, you ask them to do something and they forgot to do it and it has a negative impact on the team, and you start yelling and taking all your desk and swiping it off the desk and you're mad and you're throwing stuff, nobody is going to feel safe to make a mistake in front of you. And if that's the vibe that you want to create for your team, then so be it, but you want to own that. But typically, most leaders, most entrepreneurs are not trying to scare everybody into submission. So instead of starting to yell and throw and swear at somebody, what you can do is say, okay, I just need a minute. And then how do we fix it? What do we need to do to address the issue? So first, how do we clean it up and fix what we need to do? And then how do we address it with that employee so that we prevent it from happening again? And when you have better control over your responses, prevent damaging relationships and causing longer term issues. Because again, if you respond poorly to things, people don't want to come to you to admit that they made a mistake, that they have a question, that they need a day off, that they may not want to work with you or, buy from you. They're going to ghost you because it's easier than worrying about what kind of backlash they have to deal with from your emotional response. This is something that you do have to practice, especially if you are somebody who naturally is more emotive and more quick to anger and frustration. If you have a short fuse and you know that, you need to be better able to handle the emotions that are coming up. When you can do that and say, you know what, Bob, thank you for letting me know that you forgot to do that. I'm disappointed because I did talk to you about this, but let's figure out what we need to do to clean it up and get it done. And then I'd like to talk with you so that we can figure out how to prevent this from happening again. And then this is the third time that Bob has forgotten something. This might now need to be a performance conversation and potentially moving toward termination. But if this is the first time, people make mistakes. So how do we prevent this from happening? How do we make sure that this is a good learning experience and then we grow from it? And as you do that and people say, "Oh, okay, yeah, they were disappointed, but they were understanding and now I'm not going to do that again." You start to build communication, trust. People have better decision-making abilities. You've got stronger relationships and people aren't going to be constantly on edge worrying about how you will respond to everything. So that's self-regulation, is controlling the way you respond when those emotions pop up, because they're going to pop up. That's natural. But how you respond to them is emotional intelligence. The third factor, again, not a particular order, just the order I have them in, but is motivation. And this is typically known as the drive to meet goals and standards that we set for ourselves. We want to hit a target, we want to achieve it. That is motivation. Most people have intrinsic and or extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic is more internal. I just want to get this done because I love what I do and I want to do it. Or I want to get it done because I just really love checking things off my list and I feel really motivated to accomplish a lot of things. So that's intrinsically motivated. Extrinsically motivated is I want to get this done because then I might get recognized. I might get a reward. If I do this, I might make a big sale. So they're more motivated by extrinsic external factors where they might receive something in return for the work that they are doing. One is not better than the other. People are motivated differently. And when you know how you are motivated and when you know how your employees or your potential customers are motivated, you can navigate those conversations more effectively because you know that if I offer them this, they're not going to give a shit about that. That's not going to motivate them at all. But if I offer them this, then they might be more inclined to bring their A game to a situation. Now, motivation also includes your resiliency and your optimism, because as a leader, as an entrepreneur, there are some really tough days when you are coming up against rejection after rejection, or you're dealing with tough situations, or you're putting out fires, or you're going to bat for your team, and all you hear from them is the hard stuff. They're not thanking you for the work that you're doing, but they're complaining about something or they have concerns. It can feel really thankless. So motivation is one of those things that gets you up and says, today was a tough day. And I don't know why I ever wanted to be a leader or an entrepreneur because, man, this is hard. And it is. And so if you are a leader and you do desire to be better, if you are an entrepreneur and you want to keep trying, give yourself a pat on the back because it is not an easy job. Neither one of them is an easy job. And I somehow managed to pick both of them. And we're all a little glutton for punishment at some time. But when you are motivated to keep going and say, today was tough, but here's what I learned, or here's what I need to do differently tomorrow to be better and to keep going and to see happier, better days. Because some days it's super rewarding to know that you really helped an employee meet a goal or develop or overcome a challenge, or as an entrepreneur to make a big sale or feel like you are making a good name for yourself and that you have a positive reputation. Like those things are like, yes, I'm doing it. So motivation is what's going to push you out of your comfort zone to keep showing up and to keep bringing your best so that you can get where you want to go. The fourth factor is empathy. Empathy is probably the one that most people think of when they think of emotional intelligence. They kind of think of them as one and the same. But empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of somebody else. And so this is not like sympathy where I feel sad for you, but wow, I can understand what you're feeling. I put myself in your shoes and I can feel how disappointed you must be. But it's where you put yourself in their perspective and try to understand how they are actually feeling. You can show empathy through the way you communicate. It's when you actually listen to understand, active listening. It's when you understand their body language to say, even though you're saying X, I'm noticing that you're giving off Y, and I want to ask you a little bit more about that. It's showing some respect for different viewpoints. It's saying things like, thank you for telling me that. That must be really hard. Or, wow, I can understand why you're feeling overwhelmed. Instead of saying things like, oh, well, I have a lot going on outside of work, but I'm still here. That's not empathetic. Everybody has different levels and different thresholds of what they can manage and what they can tolerate and what they consider to be enough or too much. So you saying I lost my mom last year and I'm fine. I didn't need to take time off work, or I've got a sick parent at home that I'm taking care of, but you don't see me complaining. When you say things like that, people feel like you are not understanding where they're coming from, that you're not showing any kind of human decency to say, I get that you've got a lot going on. Thank you for sharing that with me because you didn't have to. How can I support you? How do we work together so that you can still get your job done while knowing that you have this other stuff happening outside of work? As a customer, I will follow up with you in 2 weeks. Don't worry about this. I know we were about to sign a deal. I'm going to give you a couple weeks to deal with what you have going on. I'll reach out to you 2 weeks from now and I'll see how things are going. And if things are better, we can move forward. And if they're not, we'll put a pin in it and I'll come back and I'll follow up with you and make sure that we are keeping in touch. Something like that makes people feel seen and heard and understood. And they think, wow, they get it. And I really want to work with them. And things like that help you with referrals and word of mouth. Because when they say, wow, I worked with Erica and she was just such a good person. When I needed this, she was willing to work with me, and I feel really thankful for that. And I'm definitely going to sign that contract when we get back in touch. And if you're looking for whatever services she offers, you should work with her too. So that's something where you build a positive reputation versus being a jerk and pushing, pushing, pushing and saying, like, I get that you've got a lot going on, but we've been working on this for a couple of weeks. Are you ready to sign or not? That just, it shows complete disregard for anything that they have going on. So empathy is just understanding how somebody is feeling and showing some decency around that. And then lastly, the fifth factor is social skills. And this is where we say, okay, they're a people person because they really know how to communicate. They are reading body language. They know how to influence and persuade. They're somebody who is really good at talking to people and striking up a conversation. They are really good at verbal and nonverbal language and saying, okay, you're saying this, but I feel like you're not feeling that. Can you share what your concerns are? And as a leader, that might look like, okay, everybody, we're in a team meeting. This is the decision that we're making. Is everybody on board? Yeah, we're okay with that. And you could tell by the body language that, okay, I don't really feel that you are as confident in that as you are saying. Or I notice that everybody's looking at each other, hoping somebody else will speak up. What's on your mind? What concerns do you have? What questions do you have? And it's giving people a chance to voice their concerns and hear them and move forward. Social skills are what help you to understand the different nuances of communication. So when people say one thing, you understand, okay, are they being honest, or based on body language, are they not being honest with me? What do I need to know and understand to be more effective in how we're communicating? And it's really important because, as I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship and leadership are both based very much on relationships. And if you aren't good with people, it's going to make it harder for you to network, to give feedback, to coach, to manage, and to deal with those types of interactions. Now, we talked about the 5 factors, and the 2 at the beginning were self-awareness and self-regulation. And I want to share a couple of tips with you on how to implement those more readily. And so the first one was self-awareness, where you recognize the emotions in yourself. And one thing I mentioned is to take a quick moment and check in with your body and feel where you might be holding any tension. Just take a quick breather, 30 seconds or less. You don't need to take a lot of time, but check in and say, how's my body? Where am I holding tension? Is there anywhere that's carrying any undue energy? Try to figure out what's causing that. So check your physical signs, the emotional signs. Try to put a name to it if you can, because that will help you track back to the cause. The problem was the interaction you had this morning where maybe you felt dismissed. You brought up a concern and you felt like nobody listened to it. You had a really great idea and everybody shut it down before they even gave it a chance. Or maybe you gave some feedback and asked your team to do something and they didn't do it and you felt like they didn't respect you and they weren't following instructions. When you know what's causing that, it helps you to better handle the situations as they come up, or you might need to actually address the situation with the person that's causing those emotions or causing that trigger. That is a respectful way to voice a concern, and then hopefully that opens a door to a conversation. But when you know what's causing it, you can then better address it. Another thing you can do to help with recognizing emotions is to journal. And this doesn't have to be like a diary of sorts, but sometimes writing down your thoughts. Like I went to this meeting and I shared my thoughts and this idea that I've been thinking about, and Bob totally dismissed it, and I felt really frustrated or embarrassed because I felt like we just moved right past it and everyone looked at me for my response, and I was embarrassed that I didn't know what to say or do. And so write it down, acknowledge it, and then say, okay, right now is not the time for me to deal with this, but I got it out of my head. And I have it down on a sticky note, or you can have just a little legal notebook, something, whatever it might be, to get it down. And then later on, you can come back to it and say, yes, that's right. I wanted to address this issue. Instead of just keeping it in your head and letting it swirl up there, get it out. Write it down, do some journaling. And it helps you to identify any thought patterns or triggers and say, every time I have a meeting with Bob, I come out feeling some kind of way. Maybe there's an interaction that we need to address with Bob and how we communicate. Now, the next thing that we are going to talk about is how to regulate and manage those emotions. Now that you can say, okay, I recognize my body and what it's doing, I recognize the emotions that are popping up. I felt dismissed. I felt embarrassed. What's the root of that? Now, what you can do is one, pause before you react. So if Bob comes in and says something that immediately triggers you and you want to respond, take a second and just count to 5. And that gives you a chance to get from that fight or flight, like 10 down a little bit to say, okay, I wanted to say something inappropriate, but what I'm going to say instead was, excuse me, Bob, could you please repeat what you said? Or can you please explain what you meant by that? Very simple, very professional, but that makes Bob have to repeat whatever it was you said, and hopefully maybe in a better way this time. The goal here is that no matter how somebody else is acting or behaving, you can control how you respond to it. Count to 5, count to 10 if you need it. Or if you're in a meeting and you feel like, okay, I'm really upset and everyone's staring at me and I need a moment, say, I'd really like to take a quick pause, maybe take a 5-minute break. I need to, and you go to the restroom, go outside, just walk around, get out of that room for a little bit and give yourself a chance to regulate your system. And that way, when you come back, you're in a clear headspace, because when you are in the moment and you feel like you're in the spotlight and everybody is waiting for your response, a lot of thoughts can go through your head. One is fight or flight. 2 is, okay, well, everyone's waiting for me to say something, so I'm going to play it up a little bit because everyone's looking at me. Or maybe you fluster through it because you just want to say something. It's not really what you want to say. You're just trying to get a thought out. Don't do that. You might be thinking, I don't want to take a 5-minute break and disrupt the meeting. I will say that it's better to take a few moments to get yourself together and respond accordingly than it is to blow up and say something where then you're spending months or years trying to repair a relationship. Or if it's a customer situation and now you may have lost a contract opportunity, it is better to just take a few moments to get yourself into a good headspace to address it correctly than it is to totally burn that bridge. All right. The next thing is mindset. Now, this is not toxic positivity. I don't believe in that. I think sometimes things happen and they just suck, and it is what it is. But even when they suck, how do we view it in a way that puts us in a better headspace? To reframe your negative thoughts, maybe you had to drive into the office today because your manager, your boss asked you to, and it's an hour to work, and then you have an 8-hour day at least, and then you've got another hour plus to get home with traffic, and you're like, I've got an hour drive in traffic, and I'm going to be home late. Yeah, that sucks. That's hard. But what you could do instead is say, I do have this drive. Oh, but that meeting today was tough. So on my drive home, I am going to listen to my favorite music, and I'm going to jam out and I'm going to sing loudly because nobody will hear me, and I'm just going to sing my emotions. Or maybe I'm going to listen to some meditation music and just have some zen. Or I'm going to check out my favorite podcast because I don't have time to listen to it at home. And then when I get home, I will have processed some of these emotions and feelings that I had throughout the day so that when I walk in the door, I can be present for my spouse, for my pets, for my children, for my friend, for my parents, whoever you might be going to see. Take that time to reframe it and say, okay, whew, I got to drive home. I'm going to use that time for me to just as my me time. Or if you're dealing with a really difficult customer or employee, and you can say, whew, that person is a doozy to work with. What a pain in my butt. That's one way. Or you can say, wow, they asked a lot of good questions. A lot of these things are on my website. So if they are still asking them, that means that maybe it's not on my website in a way that makes sense to other people or they're not easy to find. How do I make that better so that they don't have to ask me that in my sales pitch? Do I maybe have a one pager of my resources and my services? What can I do better so I'm prepared to address their concerns? You can use it as an opportunity to be better prepared. Reframing negative thoughts in a way that is more productive. And then you can do some mindfulness exercises. When I talk about self care, I just want to put this disclaimer out. Some people are like, I really suck at self care. Self care doesn't have to be, I'm going to take a bath, listen to some music, sit with some candles in the dark, I'm going to go get a massage. Sometimes self care is saying, I'm going to watch my favorite show tonight. Sometimes self care is, wanted to cook, but I'm too tired, so I'm going to order something out. And that for me is self care today. I don't have to worry about dinner. Okay. Sometimes self care is saying, no, I can't do that. No, I can't meet you tonight. I am going to go home and have a date with my pajamas and my dog, and we're going to watch some television and eat ice cream. That might be self care. So when people say self care, I think sometimes the perception is spending a lot of money, doing a lot of lavish things and spas and whatnot. It doesn't have to be anything that costs money. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or frilly. It could just be hanging out, something that's going to recharge you and make you feel better. In addition to self care, is some mindfulness. Mindfulness could be doing some meditation. Maybe it's listening to some calming music, a deep breathing, where you're just doing some box breathing, is where you do it for counts of four. So you in for four, you hold it for four, you breathe out for four, and you pause for four, and then another in. And after a few times of doing that, you bring yourself back to a more calm state. Tapping or EFT, emotional freedom technique, is where you have different pressure points on your face and body where you can tap them. There's stuff online that you can learn about that, but sometimes that helps to regulate your emotions. There are things like going for a walk, or if you're somebody who likes to do exercise, maybe you do some stretches, some light weights, something where you're moving your body. Get out in nature, do some stretches at your desk, do some jumping jacks, something that's just getting you moving. Any of that can help you to get out of your current mental state into a better state. And then lastly, if you need to, ask for help. And this could be from a coach, a colleague, a mentor, a spouse, anybody, a professional, maybe it's a therapist. That's all okay too. There's no shame in asking for assistance anywhere. Now, this is a common challenge for entrepreneurs, but again, also leaders. I'm going to go over these pretty quickly, but one is burnout. And that's where you are pushing yourself too hard and you are burning yourself out. How emotional intelligence can help is that you will recognize the early warning signs in your body before it's too late. So you start to notice, like, I'm working a lot more hours than I wanted to be working. I'm feeling really distracted all the time and I can't keep up. I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. I dread getting up and having to work. All of that is burnout. So if you are feeling that before it gets to a point where you need to take a break, take a break. Because if you don't take one proactively, your body will force you to take one when it's really inconvenient and it's going to be a lot longer than you want it to be. So do things, find ways to set healthy boundaries. Learn when to ask for help and or to delegate. Make time for things that recharge you. When I say recharge, I don't mean escapes. Scrolling on social media is an escape. It is a distraction. Something that recharges you is maybe reading a book. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's meditation. It's the stuff that we talked about, the self-care, whatever it is that floats your boat, fills your boots. If it's something that makes you feel recharged and refreshed, do that. If it's going fishing, I don't know. But don't just distract yourself with alcohol or scrolling or something else. You want to find something that is going to actually recharge you and make you feel better. And keep aligned with your deeper motivations. And so as a leader, you don't really become a leader because you're looking to be a millionaire. You don't start a business because you are trying to get rich quick. Typically, there's a deeper motivation to that. I want to help people. I have a really big passion for whatever it is I'm doing. So when you keep aligned, it will be easier for you to stay motivated and engaged. When you start to move away from that alignment, you're not going to be as pumped to do whatever it is that you're doing because you're no longer aligned with what got you in it to begin with. So make sure that you kind of keep coming back in touch with yourself. Imposter syndrome impacts everybody. Now, again, this was a presentation for entrepreneurs, but this is also for managers. If you're not familiar with imposter syndrome, it's when you start to think, I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I'm a fraud. I shouldn't be doing this. I don't deserve this position. When people look at me, they're going to realize they made a mistake in hiring me or promoting me. What you can do with emotional intelligence is to recognize when it's an imposter syndrome thought versus an actual legitimate concern. Did I pay the bill this month? That's a legitimate concern. Oops, I didn't. Got to do that. Versus I suck at my job because I forgot to pay the bill this month. You forgot. Okay, great. How do we fix it for next time? Versus I'm not good enough. I'm not qualified to give this kind of advice or feedback. I'm not good enough to be coaching these people. They have more experience than I do. Those are imposter syndrome thoughts. Emotional intelligence can help you to separate those emotional reactions like, oh, I'm a failure. I should quit right away. Why am I doing this? No one's going to ever believe in me. That is an emotional response. It is not a fact. So when you are able to use emotional intelligence, you can start to look at it and say, okay, is this a fact? It is not. So it's just in my head. It is a self doubt that I can say, hey, self doubt, shut up, move it on. And understand that everybody, it says all entrepreneurs, again, this was who the target audience was when I presented it, but everybody goes through this at least once in their life. It is normal. You are normal. The voices, the self doubt is not real. It is not true. And when you can, reframe that negative self talk. So, how can you make this a positive instead? And then lastly, not lastly, because there are a lot of challenges for leaders and entrepreneurs, but the lastly for what I'm talking about in this presentation is decision fatigue. And that's when you can't make another decision. Somebody says, do you want to do this or that? And you're like, I don't know. I have no idea. So decision fatigue is when you are able to recognize, I'm not in the right headspace to make that kind of decision right now. Do I have somebody that I trust that I can delegate it to? Can I do it later today? I need to take a little break for lunch and get a walk in to clear my head. Can I make that decision this afternoon? Can it wait till tomorrow morning? Decision fatigue is to recognize when you're not in the right emotional state to make an important decision and then to decide how to handle that. And when possible, learn which decisions you love making and which ones drain you. We're like, I don't really care, just anything, just get it done. And when you have something that you don't want to do that does drain you, then try to either delegate it to somebody else on your team, or if you can automate it, or if you need to be the one to do it, sometimes that just is what it is. Try to prioritize it so that you are getting it done when you are fresh and awake and alive, so that it's not something that you're saving to the last minute when you just don't have the brain power. Trust your gut. Your intuition is there. If something doesn't feel right, just listen to it. Don't make any snap decisions. When possible, try to create ways to automate or create systems that will reduce unnecessary decision making. So if it's something that's redundant and you can just automate it and make it happen, make it happen. That way you don't have to think about it, just it's going to do it, and then you can focus your time on the big things that need you. And then again, just know when to take a step back and when to recharge and say, I am not in the right place to make this decision to do this thing right now. And for me to bring my best self to my team, to my business, to my customers, I need to take a little break and come back tomorrow whenever that I can be in a better place to do that. It is not a failure for you to recognize that you need to make those adjustments. Mentioned some time management techniques at the beginning, because if you aren't keeping up with your time management, you're going to feel scattered and all over the place. There are 6 different techniques that I will share with you. The first one is the 1-3-5 technique, where each day you identify your list of things to do. And say there's 20, 50 things on this list. The goal here is that you take one key task, something that absolutely must be accomplished that you need to do. That's your one. That's your one. So one key task. Then you pick 3 medium tasks. And then you pick 5 small tasks. So your big list of 20 to 50 things is now 9 things. And you obviously want to make sure you get that first one done. That's the priority for the day. And the reason that this works is that studies show that we do better when we take things and break them into more manageable chunks. So when you have a smaller list of things to do, it's easier to do it and it's not as overwhelming than looking at this massive to-do list. The second technique is called deep work. And this is where you block off time on your calendar to focus without interruption. And one thing that I like to mention to folks is when you're setting boundaries, sometimes the hardest boundary to set is with yourself. So when you have deep work, I'm going to say from 2 to 4, I'm going to work on this project that I have. And then I look at my calendar and I'm like, well, some other things came up. I guess, 2 to 4, I don't really have any meetings. I could do that stuff during that time. No, that's time that you set aside for this really important project. So keep those boundaries for yourself. And from 2 to 4, I turn my phone on silent. I turn off any IMs. I have no social media. Maybe it's just music without lyrics. You just have some music in the background, something quiet. You focus. We're not scrolling the internet. We're not taking IMs. We're not having people come in and talk to us face to face. This is blocked time. And so from 2 to 4, you focus on this project. And at the end of the block, either you are done with your project and great, congratulations, or you're not, but then you schedule another session of deep work another day. And you keep doing that until that project is done, and then you do another one. So the goal here is that we are not good at multitasking, even though we like to think that we are. So when you give yourself a block of time and you block off the distractions, you are able to focus on just that one thing. And you're not getting pulled into different directions. That block of time is 100% on this one thing. The third technique is called Eat the Frog, and it's a funny name, but if you think about, most people don't want to eat a live frog, a raw frog. And so let's pretend that you have a plate of your favorite things in the world to eat, all the most delicious stuff, and you see this frog on there and you're thinking, oh, I really don't want to eat that frog. And so if you eat this good stuff, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh, I have to eat everything on this plate. And so at some point I have to eat that frog. And it's going to be really hard for you to focus on what you're doing because in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I gotta eat that thing. So what the thought process in this one is that if you tackle the most important, sometimes the least desirable task up front first, everything else after that's a piece of cake. If you have this plate of all this delicious stuff and you just eat the frog, just get it done. Everything else on that plate is something that you're going to enjoy and it's going to feel so much easier in comparison. The 80-20 rule is when you focus your time on the tasks that will have the biggest impact. So the thought is if you have 100 tasks, 20 of those tasks are going to have 80% of the impact. And so you might do the other 80 of those things, but they're not really going to move the needle. They're not going to get you anywhere. But if you do those 20 things, like that's going to move the needle significantly. So you want to focus your effort on that 20%. That's going to have the biggest impact, the biggest bang for your buck. The Pomodoro technique, Pomodoro, and if I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. It's Italian, but it means tomato. And it's because the little timer that the person used was shaped like a tomato. But this technique is where you use a timer. So it's a mix of timer and focus work, where you block off time on your calendar and you have a timer and you set it for 25 minutes. And you say, okay, I'm going to work on this project for 25 minutes. And when it dings, you go take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes are done, you come back, you do another 25 minutes, ding, 5-minute break. And you keep doing that. Typically, if we stay and say, I'm just sit at my desk for the next 3 hours and just knock this out, your productivity and your energy are going to drop down throughout. But if you take those breaks, your energy doesn't drop as much. It's going to stay a little bit more even because you're taking the breaks in between to recharge and rest, and you're coming back and you're doing the same task. So you're not having to start and restart different things. You're doing one thing, but you're giving yourself some mental breaks. And science and studies have shown that when you give yourself a little bit of a mental break, it actually helps you to be more productive. So get away from your desk every now and then. If you need to use a timer, use a timer. And then the last one, which is probably the most popular one, is the Eisenhower matrix or the productivity matrix. And it is 4 quadrants of the axes are urgent and important. You would create this grid and you would put your tasks in these boxes. And if it is urgent and important, you need to be the one to do it and you need to do it quickly. If it's something that is not urgent, it can wait, but it's important enough that you're the one that has to do it, then you can plan it and prioritize it for later. It doesn't have to be done today, but you do have to do it soon. If it is urgent, but not important enough that you have to be the one to do it, you can delegate it to somebody else that you trust. And that way it's getting done quickly, but somebody else can be the one to do it. And if it is not urgent and not important, you don't need to do it at all because it's a waste of your time. That is the Eisenhower matrix. And once you start to implement these, you will have a better sense of control of your time where you will be able to give a little bit more freely of your emotional energy to other things. Now, the summary, again, this was for entrepreneurs. I've said that multiple times. There's a lot of failure, there's a lot of rejection, there's a lot of challenges. And this is also similar for leaders. There's a lot of challenges as a leader. And the mindset piece is really important because there are days when you want to give up, but you shouldn't, because what you can do is reframe things and think of it a little differently so that when you look at these speed bumps as opportunities, or you say, okay, I'm really, really nervous about this meeting I have where I have to give feedback and I'm going to go and be as prepared as I can. But if you go in thinking, if I do it wrong, it's the end of the world. This employee is going to quit. I'm going to get fired. Everything's going to go up in flames. There's a lot of pressure when you go into that situation. But if you look at it as an opportunity and say, I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to use the frameworks that I have. Again, there's feedback models and different things that I can teach you that you can use. You can say, okay, if it doesn't go well, I'm going to make mental notes of what went wrong, and then I will continue to practice so that the next time I have to do this, I will be even better. Because giving feedback takes time. It's not easy and it's different for each person because each person responds differently, but also each situation is different. Sometimes it's performance, sometimes it's behavior, sometimes it's something different. There's always different factors that tie into it. So when you look at it as an opportunity to say, I'm going to do my best, regardless of how it goes, whether it goes well or if it goes poorly, I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to implement those changes for next time. It takes some of the pressure off of you to give you a little bit of grace as a human being to say, I'm doing the best I can. And if it doesn't go well, how do I do it differently next time? And so when you have better control of your mindset and your emotions, when you go in to give feedback, the employee isn't picking up on your nervousness and your feelings of self-doubt and not having control. The sales meeting, if you're talking to a customer or an investor, if you're going in thinking, I'm really nervous, why would they want to invest in my company? If you're feeling that way, they're going to feel that too. And if you don't believe in you, why should they believe in you? Why should they want to buy what you're selling? So you want to carry yourself with more confidence and you want to believe in yourself. Mindset's super important. While there might be other leaders out there, other entrepreneurs who are doing the same exact thing that you are, there are people out there waiting for you and what you bring and how you deliver it. And so that's something that I really believe in. If you are not putting yourself out there, people will not know that you exist and they're waiting for you. They want to align with a company, a person that they believe in, that they resonate with, that they want to support. So you want to make sure that you're putting yourself out there in the best way. If you are interested in improving, then I hope that you would consider working with me because I have courses. I also do one-on-one coaching. I have a blog and some other stuff on authenticfoundations.podia.com. And I have a LinkedIn. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn, my name is Erica R. Taylor Beck. But I hope that that was helpful in explaining emotional intelligence and why it's important for entrepreneurs and for leaders to create better workplaces and better environments for themselves and for their teams. And the reason that it's so important for you to have a good handle on your own emotions and how you handle situations so that you can bring your best to the relationships that you're trying to build. So even as an entrepreneur or as a leader, relationships are going to be the core of what you're doing. So if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, Erica Taylor Beck from Authentic Foundations.